So very good afternoon to all of you. I know we are in a post-lunch session. I also know that this is the last panel discussion for the session. So I think we have quite an arduous task ahead of us. But I was just thinking in my head that we are talking about culture, we are talking about engagement, we are talking about well-being, inclusion, all quite powerful topics in themselves. And I've been hearing the conversation thus far and a lot of conversation around we are from HR, we are from the fraternity. So if we were to just combine these topics a little bit, right? When we talk about culture, one of the biggest buzzwords today is learning culture. And I think that's what all of us are here for. When we talk about engagement, okay, maybe we'll try and do a little bit of an audience engagement as we talk. I'm sure you're bored of just listening to people. You want more engagement from us. And when we talk about well-being, I think one of the most important things in well-being is also our intellectual well-being, right? So let me start by asking you all a question. Okay, what's the biggest buzzword everybody's talking about right now? ChatGPT. It had to come, right? So Gen AI. Can somebody tell me when did this word Gen AI actually start? What was the first evidence of Gen AI? How long back did this whole concept start? Any guesses? I'm waiting.
Come on guys, loudly.
2
years.
G.I. Joe. Wow, okay. Sorry? Late 90s? Actually, he's close. So Gen AI actually, the first evidence of Gen AI was a chatbot called Eliza, which was developed in 1960. Okay? Let's ask another question of you all. Organization culture, we talk so much about it. When did this word get coined? Who coined it? Any guesses? See, sometimes we feel we know about these topics in a working sense, right? But if you were to just think about the depth of these topics and how they have evolved over time, you would get a lot of perspective, right? So just for your information, the term organization culture was coined in 1951. And I think there was a book written by Elliot Jakes on the changing culture of a factory. And after that, there was a lot more research on this whole terminology of org culture. I'm sure all of you heard about Edgar Sheen and his work in the space of culture and change and things like that. So, my only submission to all of you is that while we talk about these topics today and we will learn from the collective body of experience of all these great panel members here, but do invest a little bit in digging deeper into these concepts, because when we apply it in changing times, like we are doing it now, there is no recipe book from the past that can really make us successful in the future. So the better the depth that we have on these topics, the fresher our perspectives can be. Okay? So with that, let me just now request all my panel members to quickly introduce themselves, and then we will get our conversation started. Would you like to start?
Check. Hi, my name is Jubin. I lead the HR for Tech Product Enabling at Myntra.
Hi, my name is Asha Subramanian, and I'm a global CHRO at Subex.
Hi, Karan Verma. I lead a health and wellness organization called Bridge Health, operating out of Bangalore.
Hi everyone, my name is Alpana Datta. I'm a partner at EY, and hope to see more during the conversation. Yeah.
Hi everyone, wonderful to be here. I am Smita Subhash. I lead HR Tech for Uber in India.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. I call myself Coach Ram because coaching is my passion. So that's my passion, whereas my day job, I work with Jockey Speedo, Page Industries as the Chief Learning Officer. Part of it, I lead learning, talent, leadership development, employee engagement, and wellness.
Thank you, Ram. I am Sudhir Patro from HCL Healthcare, and thank you for staying active so far. And I can hear the clicking of tea, saucers, and plates. So stay with us for another 30-40 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. So since we, sort of initiated this whole conversation on culture, you would all agree that culture is one of the most discussed topics, right? And rightly so, because we went through so much in the last 5 to 7 years. In fact, when the pandemic hit us, there was a major shift in every organization's ways of working. And it is the collective ways of working which forms culture in a way, right? So a lot of myths got busted. For example, working from home will never work. For instance, if I don't have this person in front of me, that person probably isn't going to be productive. You know, so many different myths got busted. So we discovered a certain newness of what could work from a culture perspective. But as the pandemic ended and organizations took a call on what kind of working model they will follow, there was again a need to recalibrate culture, right? If I'm going to be a fully in-office organization, what's that refined culture? You know, what is it that I can learn from the past few years and improve my culture? What are the new risks that I can safeguard myself against? If I'm a hybrid organization, again, the challenges could be different. So let's just go around and ask our panel members a little bit about what is their view on what really makes for a strong culture. You know, what can we do about this?
I can start.
Yes, please.
So, you know, as we met for a debrief, right, and we were talking about culture, I was actually thinking, and actually you said it, right, the culture in 1950s, from that we've known about culture, what culture can drive, or what's the culture we need to build in. Actually, I was dabbling around what really, do we even want to talk about culture, right? And then we have the post-COVID era. I think for me, it's not about culture, but what's the right culture now the organization needs to dabble around, right? And more so post-COVID is what I have seen is customers driving the culture. I'll give you an example why I say that. For example, Apple, if you look at, in their public forums, they talk about innovation all the time. But that's because the internal culture is experimentation. So because it's experimentation, internal culture, that's what's coming out to the customer. Similarly, if you look at Disney, right, for an example, the theme parks is all about experiences. So if it's about experiences, the internal culture is about employee experiences. If you give that, that's what the customer will lead. And that's what I'm seeing most organizations do today. It's not what the leader's value is, but what customer is driving, and hence the connect to the employees and employees connect to the customers, how the culture is now shifting. All the old cliches of, you know, like Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy, and all of that stuff still holds true.
Yeah.
But for me, I think as we evolve in this whole new Gen AI space, with a lot of human and machine synergy coming into play, I think the right culture definition is going to be very, very important. Every organization has a culture. I think that's a non-debatable argument, but it's more about the right culture and what the customer is demanding from you. I think that's how I look at the way culture shift is happening as we move towards a new era, if you will.
Absolutely. I think so two very important takeaways. One is the fact that, you know, your culture absolutely has to support your strategic objectives. You can't be wanting to do something in the market and do completely something opposite in the way you are working internally with your employees. And the other part that you talked about, which is to just make sure that it is lived in the right manner by the organization. Sure.
Yeah, again, a warm welcome to everybody. Surely a difficult task now to keep everybody up on this. Okay, so what I feel is, one thing is somehow, like, you know, as the entire group, 70 to 80% consists of HR, I feel that somewhere this culture is boiled down to only HR folks, right? Like, you know, culture, why is it not in a good space? Because the HR team is not fine. So I think the responsibility has to be shared between the top management and, like, you know, the managers, the entire lot. So that is how you probably spread the right culture. And, like, you know, culture again, like, you know, as what my colleague was telling, like, you know, it is just not something specific to, like, you know, every organization. It has to be unique or something. It changes from one organization to another,
yes.
And it needs to be dynamic. As one of my good friend told that, like, you know, change is the only constant thing what we'll need to look at, and we probably have to dig deep into it every probably, like, you know, once in a year or once in 2 years to see, like, you know, what is the kind of culture what we can actually recreate, right? Gen Z's, there's a different culture, and within an organization there's never one culture. There's at least hundreds of cultures. Like, you know, if you go into age group of 25, like, you know, average age 25, it's absolutely different. The way they talk, or like, what the activities, what they require is different. And like, probably healthcare is for somebody like, who's little senior in the organization. Younger group requires more of activities, engagement. So it probably is like, very, very probably debated this one. And previously somebody was telling like, HR, please wake up. It's just not the Rangoli. Please, let's like, please, my humble submission is I think HR has gone much, much beyond all these kind of things. And we are sitting in boardroom today and like, we're talking business, guys. Come on, right? So I surely will not take that as an HR, because we really work hard, and finally we just get that like, thankless kind of a job, right? I do agree on that. And surely that is a humble submission, not to please talk that way on HR at all.
Okay.
Asha, we are very thankful to you and all the HRs in the room. We couldn't do without you.
No, absolutely. So I think important takeaways, one is clearly the fact that it is everybody's responsibility, right? So there may be certain people who may be a deeper expert in crafting the culture, in assessing the culture, but then implementing culture is everybody's responsibility. And the fact that it also has to be dynamic, it has to stay true to the demographics of the organization, to the business of the organization, to the changes that are happening. Yes, we do not want to compromise on what is the core culture of the organization, irrespective of the subcultures. Certain things will always be non-negotiables, but certain other things could be slightly varied depending on the subculture group that we are talking about. What do you say, Ken?
Perfect. So, very humbly, I'd like to narrow down the scope of what culture means to me as a CEO of an organization first. To me, I think an organizational culture is all about how do you make decisions on a day-to-day basis. What do you prioritize, what do you not prioritize? When there's a conflict specifically, for example, a customer wants something and your finance leader wants something else, how do you resolve that conflict? If you're a leader of a team and the team wants something while HR may give guidance, which is a little different, how do you resolve that? So I think culture is very real, tangible, and it is something that helps you resolve those conflicts and decisions on a daily basis. With that definition, I think you do need to, because all of us lead multiple roles. If you look at the number of roles we live every day is very large, and sometimes the values that we have to play in those roles is also different. Sure. So you do need to articulate what matters to this particular organization, why, and it links back to strategy. That's one way to ensure. And the other is you got to live it, right? Like, for example, I'm a health and wellness organization. And if after eating food and I preach to everyone, you got to stand for at least 15 minutes, I made sure that I was standing there for 30 minutes for the last session. But if I was sitting, my team out there would say, "Acha, bolte to hai, lekin," right? So I think you got to live it as well. Those are two very simple things.
Well said, well said. Smita, what are your views?
I think culture is driven a lot by the company's mission and its values as well. And I think it really comes to the test when things are really tough and when you really need to navigate that. If I take Uber's example, at the start of 2020, think about it, we are a ride-share company, and suddenly the world comes to a standstill. And what do we have common among all employees to really look back to? And it was actually the mission of the company, which was reimagining movement, and it was the values that the company had. That's what it had. And then we had to dig very deep there and then say, okay, if we are reimagining movement, okay, people are not moving, but what can we move? We can move heavy equipment. So freight started. We can move groceries. We can move food. So Uber Eats started across the globe. And then it was also about moving essentials like medical equipment or medical personnel. And then looking at every decision, like Karan said, in terms of, are you looking at it through the lens of your values? And some of Uber's values were being trip obsessed, really building with heart or standing for safety, all very important at that time. And so cut to 3 years later, you have a delivery business that's as big as your ride-share business. And there is so much in terms of newer verticals that have come up, right from taking a hot air balloon in Turkey to self-driving cars, we have it all. So I think when times are really tough, that's when you dig in and really look at what your mission and values are, and that's what culture is to me.
Well said, thank you.
Yeah, so couple of thoughts. When you say culture, the best definition I've heard is, the smell of the place, right? And when people say this is the way things work here, that's what you refer
Yeah.
to as culture. Some of the dimensions, in terms of power distance. We talk about that even in terms of cultural differences between countries. So, in a very young organization, the way people speak with each other differ differ with each other in terms of opinions, in terms of even meetings, ideation, etc. Vis-a-vis a very hierarchical culture, then innovation gets stifled, right? I've also heard an interesting statistic where they did some research on the number of plane crashes and in which country there are number of plane crashes, and then looked at what is the cultural affiliation to it. So a culture where you just cannot speak up or speak against your boss, right? And you will not speak even if something is going horribly wrong. And I'll not name the country, but incidentally, that country has a record of highest number of plane crashes.
Yeah.
So culture is not just a soft element. It has like all of us spoke about, has ramifications across. And we also spoke about how is it different. So I come from an organization where there is manufacturing, there is sales, and there is corporate, right? And manufacturing setups work, they're more on efficiency, to the detailing, and so on and so forth. So following processes, compliance, adhering to the T, that is a focus area there. When it comes to something like a product development, you would want a different kind of, you would want to nurture more creativity, more experimentation, allow scope for more failures. So you will see different dimensions at play in different parts of the organization. Then, of course, there is a layer of the leader who brings in their own flavor. So while your values sort of define saying, overarching, this is what we are, how it plays out, in different parts of the organization is very different. The title is very interesting, strengthening culture through inclusivity. And for me, when it comes to inclusion, this I heard it from a very senior leader who said, if we are able to build an organization or a setup where everyone has equal access, no one has to fight for visibility. An extrovert, a great storyteller, a good marketer, vis-a-vis someone who is just going about doing his job, right? Both of them have equal access, visibility, etc., then that's something that truly leads to peak performance.
Yeah.
Because you're not fighting with the culture. You don't have to be something else. You can be yourself and still the merit is recognized of sorts.
Absolutely. So it definitely makes a lot of business sense to get your culture right, and culture is not just about what you do when somebody is watching, it's about the smell of the place, it's what happens when the lights go off, it's something that you abide by no matter what. Great. Sudhir.
Yeah, thank you. So, there is a risk when you're speaking at the last, especially when you have a coach besides you. So, but thank you, Ram, for those insights. So before coming to culture, have you ever seen a book written that this is the culture handbook of the organization? You might have seen vision statements, mission statements, values, and a lot of other things which is written. But culture is something which is not written. So that's the advantage and disadvantage both, because then it can be loosely bound and very, very wide perception of that. Now let's cut to see what practical implication of culture could be. I'm just taking a little liberty here. As Indians, is it okay for us to be late for some of the events, meetings, or other things? So I take that as a yes. But as Indians, are we quite respectful to parents, to fellow colleagues, and to others? So I think these are the things nobody tells us to do, and it is not written anywhere. Now let's say, before Britishers came in, Were we like this? I think that's something, which we could go back and dig out and find out. Probably we were very different. We had much higher esteem within us versus what it is now. Now what it means. For an organization, either you manage the culture or the culture will manage you. Without even you knowing that, that's what is already spread in the minds of employees, stakeholders, external environment, and everybody else. And somewhere in your, back of the mind, you also realize that that's the culture. Right? So that's there. How does it come into play? So culture is a very hard-coded thing. You can't really change it in a quick fix. Let me share a story quickly with you. So there is this leader who has joined an organization and he was told that, people are lazy around here. He said, okay, let me quickly fix that. So he went to the facility. He saw a guy, leaning against a wall doing nothing. He went to him and he said, he asked him just, how much you make in a month? He said, $1,000. He said, okay, take this $4,000 and never show us your face back. Then he went back to the rest of the colleagues and he asked, can you guys tell me what this guy was doing here? He said that he was a pizza guy. He was delivering pizza. So that's the thing about it. You can't really quick fix it. So how does it evolve? And why I say it is hard-coded. So it results from your experiences, which then becomes your belief. Then you do some action around it, then it comes to result. And that result is culture. So that's a result pivotal of culture, so that's what I would say. I'll try to link it with, why we should embed it into wellness or health, so many things which we are speaking about, when Alpana will give me a chance again to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So one thing is quite clear, right, that the culture forms no matter what. It's not if you're not paying attention to it, there is no culture that is getting formed. So given the fact that the culture will get formed one way or the other, it makes a lot of sense to play a role in shaping it as you would like to see it, right? There is no use looking at the culture and then saying, oh, this doesn't work for me, this is not right, that is not right. Because if you're not paying attention to the way the culture formation is happening or doing something to shape it in the way you want, it will just probably form like a hodgepodge which is not working for the organization. Maybe just one small point I would like to mention here. Many times when we talk about culture, we talk about all the right kind of things that we want in our organization, right? What we call value creating behaviors. We want a culture of meritocracy, of inclusion, of accountability, of innovation, of risk taking. So we use all these strong positives to say this is what our culture should be. But in my experience, I've also seen that sometimes we miss looking at value eroding behaviors. Things that can actually pull your culture down very, very fast. For example, cutting short processes, not being inclusive, burning people out, not acknowledging effort. There can be such a wide variety of things, something as severe as lack of ethics. So it could be very severe to very small little things which slowly eat away the value that you're creating in your organization. So as practitioners in this space, my only urge would be that while you focus on the value creating behaviors, also focus on what might erode value and how you can preempt it as soon as possible, much before it gets hard-coded. Okay? All right, on that note, since we already...
I'll just add a line there. So another negative way of sort of defining culture is the behaviors that are tolerated end up becoming culture of the organization.
Yes, very true, very true. Okay, since we already touched a little bit upon the topic of inclusion and also, inclusion, well-being, all of these topics also we want to talk about, and these all have linkages to culture. So maybe if I can request you, Karan, to just get us started on this. How does culture translate into engagement and this very, very sensitive and important topic around well-being? Does that have any link to culture?
Very deep link, for sure. So I think engagement are of two types, right? And all of us understand. One is engagement. How do I get people more engaged with their current roles? Are they excited, passionate to do what they're doing and supposed to do well? Which then has things with productivity and all that. I think there's a wellness component there, especially emotional wellness, but also physical wellness. And the organization has to have awareness, which is why you have to build culture of wellness. As a manager, I have to be emotionally aware and supportive of the challenges. You said burn, for example. That's an important component. So I may be kicked, but I may be over-kicked and burning myself out. right? Which is not necessarily great in the long term, maybe great in the short term. So how do you as a manager? So I think it requires awareness, coaching, and we do these awareness sessions which really help. So that's one way to do it. The other is beyond my role. The organizations that start caring for you, not just because you're doing that role well or how do we help you do that role well, but good organizations do that. You got to do that. Great organizations show care for you beyond what you're able to accomplish or do well in your role. Which means, and health and wellness, since we are into that, we've looked at great organizations who say that, listen, I want to involve the spouse of the employee into wellness because I know that the employee spends 2/3 of their waking hours with us and they're not able to prioritize wellness for their spouse. Let's involve them. Let's involve the parents who may be staying in the same city or a different city. Now, these are problem statements that your employee will never talk about, will not expect you to solve for. But if you can do that, then you're starting to show care and engagement goes up.
Definitely. In fact, I'm just reminded of a survey. There is something called a Work Reimagine survey that EY runs. It's been running for the last 7 issues. And it just simply tracks what are employee expectations and what is employer action and where is there a greatest divergence. And wellness actually often comes out. The issue of potential burnout is one of the top 3 concerns of employees worldwide. But it is not necessarily one of the top 3 things that employers are focusing on. So there is a lot that needs to be done to bridge that gap. Asha,
That's why I got Bridge Health.
Yeah. Bridge Health for bridging the gap. Okay, all right, wonderful. So Asha, you were talking a little bit about all the good stuff that's happening in your company to make well-being more inclusive and this whole piece around involving families in it. So would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Today, while we tell that work-life balance, right? We slowly started evolving into work-life integration more than just making it as a balance, right?
Yeah.
And across the world, there's been this topic has evolved and a lot of good things have happened, and especially post-COVID, again, this is the most abused word, post-COVID, but I'm still using it. Post-COVID, there's been a lot of importance given to this. It can be in your organization also, a lot of good things what they have been doing, thank you mother, and also where you thank your mother on the Mother's Day and bring them to office or bring your pet to office, or it can be in diversity, in a lot of areas, right? And Subex in particular, we've started off from 2 years, we've started off about few things which are, one is on the diversity part of it, where we bring in our, the highest mark achieved in 10th standard, right? Girl child.
Okay.
So we bring them to the office and we give them about 5 years of counseling, and also we sponsor a subsidized education for them. That is something which actually has hit pretty well with the employees, and they've taken it pretty well. And also while I'm speaking, we also have Family Day, where we bring family and especially the children, and there are a lot of activities like magic show and all those things. And we also engage families especially in medical side, where we give them subsidized health checkups, and especially now this month especially, right? For the cancer, this one, for that we do some sessions for them, and also pap test and other things. And we also involve them in annual days and those kind of things. And we also have for mental health, we have a few of the psychologists who talk to these people actually, not just generally only the employees, but with the extended families also. And we have subsidized education loans for these people. So overall, I think we trying, as I told, it's a very evolving topic.
Yeah.
And you do how much ever you want. Finally, we don't have a magic wand, and it's organic, growth which should happen, over and above, right?
True.
So I think these are few things which we are taking, and we also send out mailers, especially for the freshers, because they've just joined us, to their parents to come and visit us, and also papping up, telling that this first job, and the kind of work environment what they get and other things. So these are few things what we do, and it's kind of working out actually.
So taking a very integrated approach is what you're talking about. Sudhir, would you like to talk a little bit about the wellness piece?
Thank you, Alpna. So, I'll try to give a practical view on this wellness aspect. Just two leading questions before I mention certain points which I have in my mind. You would see the general spend on healthcare for developed countries like a US or European countries is higher. So, what is your reaction to that? Is it because they have a higher sense of appreciation for employees' health? Or do you think that it's helping them in doing their business better? So if the answer is latter, then we are more clear that wellness is an investment, right? So that's one thing we should keep in mind, and then we can proceed with the rest of the discussion. Second aspect is, as I was mentioning about culture. Now, culture will always be top down. So it will be always top down, no matter whether we like it or not. It will be very less often that it is bottoms up, and when it is bottoms up, it's bit out of control. Now, when it is like that, when you go back to your offices and when you ask for a wellness budget, then you will have so many questions coming around back to you. Do we have that much of budget? Should we really spend this much on wellness? So those kind of questions will come in. So you will have a lot of internal challenges. So the question which is in front of us is, should we really embed wellness into our culture? Is that really a necessity? So if we go back, the purpose of the organization is to create performance, and performance is done by people and on a sustainable basis. Is there an organization which is there not to make money other than NGOs? So every organization has this singular objective at the core of it, and then everything else is built around it. So keeping that objective, why wellness has failed to reach us, boardroom discussion, or it is paving its way there, is because there is no data supporting it. Today, if I were to say there is a well-being program is launched and it has resulted in 30% savings in productivity or 40% reduction in sick leaves, that's a great data point to make. But today those data points are not available. Now, having this situation, what we should look at is, how do we embed this? So I am assuming that you are agreeing with me that there is a reason for embedding wellness into culture. So moving to the second aspect, what do we do about it? How do we really embed it? So if we take a rear view mirror and look at what are the three different levels of wellness. Are you at a temporary change level, or you are at a transitional level, or you are at a transformational level? 90% of the organization look at wellness as a temporary intervention because it's an initiative. Now, there is a difference between an initiative and a strategy. So when it is an initiative, it is very, very temporary. It will not see a very long-term impact, a very long-term investment from the organization. So we have to see as a starting point, is there a strategy in place or not? And that strategy, and I would say, and thanks for bringing that point, HR is working very hard, but if they do that in isolation, it's never going to see the light of the day. It will never happen. It has to be a business metric. It doesn't matter that, the amount is small or high. But there has to be an agreement, there has to be a buy-in from the business folks saying that yes, it is needed for me to perform and do a good job, and get that performance and resilience in place.
Yeah.
So once that buy-in is there, and that you have a strategy, to be in place, you could look at what are the factors or what are the things which you already have in place. What do you need? What is currently available? And what can you get? What's available in the market? So I am from a wellness organization. Karan also spoke about it. So you have very, very leading players and doing a lot of innovative things. But how do you see your strategy fitting into what's there in the market and what you are aiming to achieve, and try to create that blend? You can do it in 2-3 ways. One is you look at a sense of community, and I think we spoke about parents, spouses and things like that. So between attracting and retention of talent, as I take that ANR as a short form which generally being used by HR. It's beyond that. How does the employee will feel valued? I think today's millennials or Gen X, whatever we call them, they'll feel valued when you engage them as a family. Now there is a benefit for the organization also when they do that.
Yeah.
If you engage the family well, then you are engaging the employee also much better than how it would be in isolation. So that's the benefit. Second aspect, and very importantly, you should look at the continuity of care. If you see, as Indians, our spend on healthcare is largely on curative. It's also because we were much more fitter in our, and maybe older people like myself, but now that's not the case. So now, from a sickness investment, your investment on health has to move on the preventive side if you want to have that dividend on your health. So that continuity of care will give you that advantage. There are multiple programs which we can do. For very large organizations, we have done in the different formats, which could be from on-site, off-site, and a hybrid environment. We had that parliament also. So thankfully, we have solution for all the three formats. So that's something which is there. Lastly, I'll quickly conclude. To measure it, you should have indexes in place. If you have invested this, how will you measure that your return on investment is there or not? The indexes need not be only in terms of money. There could be happiness index, there could be wellness index, there could be multiple indexes which we can look at and create that, so that against which you can measure your investment. So that's my 2 bit on
Sure.
this. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. I know we have just about a few more minutes left, and I don't want to further delay the panel, but I absolutely have to, sort of touch upon this whole piece on inclusion that we've been also embedding in the conversation thus far. And Jubin, you were talking about some really interesting ways in which your organization is implementing it. Because when we talk about inclusion, usually, the mind always goes into gender inclusion, but that's not the only form that organizations need to do justice to. So, Jubin, would you like to share a little bit there?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about generational diversity,
Yes.
if you will, right? Even before talking about initiatives, I think I personally believe that we've just very complicated this generational diversity, right? Because for me, people are people, talent is talent, irrespective of which generation they're coming. All of them want betterment for themselves. All of them want betterment for them, as they move forward. So I think if that fundamentally, if we believe that, we don't have to have differential treatment in the organization, right? And that's what we believe in. I think none of our policies will talk about, for this generation, this is what we will do, etc., etc., etc. But what we will do is we believe that we understand at the nucleus that the needs may be different. But if there's a common vision that we all are driving, that's what we do, right? I'll give you a classic example, which very recently played out, right? Classic example, paternity leaves, right? We give 45 days of paternity leave. The adoption of it is an important piece, and that's where your generational diversity comes in. 45 days exists for everyone, right? Whoever is across generation. Possibly, let's say a millennial would want it to take it, want to go full 45 days at one go. But someone millennial who will also come back and say, I want it in blocks, right? Today, I'll take 2 weeks now after 3 months. If you're not agile there, if you're not going to be flexible there, then it's just a lip service, right?
True.
And again, just going back to our previous conversation that we talked about wellness, I truly believe today every organization has all the benefits that we talked about. In fact, we have organizations who will come and tell you, we have done benchmarking, these are the benefits, you just pick from these, right? So we have evolved to that stage. So I think every organization is giving all the benefits, but the adoption of it shouldn't be lip service. What's the point? You're giving unlimited wellness leaves, but you can't take those leaves. Or when you're taking the leaves, someone's calling you and say, finish this, finish this. Again, that's lip service, right? So I truly believe generational diversity is we've complicated way beyond the way it should be. If fundamentally we truly believe that all people are people, talent is talent, and everyone has that need, I think then it becomes very simple. The design thinking becomes very simple.
I think the very important point you mentioned here is that there should be so much of versatility in the organization that different people are able to use it in the way that is important to them. Maybe any last comments from you, Smita, and then I'll come to Ram as well.
On the topic of inclusion, I actually wanted to bring in, when you talk about diversity, we really need to make it very real for our employees. And that is when you have to relate your diversity also to how it impacts your products and your services. And I'll give you an example here. So what we do, we have all our employee resource groups, most organizations have, and you typically use an employee resource group for career building to really build that sense of community. But at Uber, we've taken that one step further, where we've created a leadership council of ERGs and technology and business leaders, and they are involved in then giving feedback on product development, giving feedback on how our marketing campaigns are run. And what we also do is every year do something called an Inclusion Day, which is basically a product jam between NGOs, between our ERGs, between people of underrepresented communities, and our technology teams coming together, looking at our entire technology platform, and then saying what are some of the ways, what are some of the pain points, how can we address them? And there are so many product features that have been rolled out as part of it, whether it is voice-enabled or in terms of security features, etc. So the fact that we've been making it a little more real for our employees has then played a very key role in inclusion, because then they can see that output versus it just being kind of like a lip service.
That's fantastic, really translating it, translating it into real, product services that you can see. Ram, any words from you on this?
So for me, Instagram Reels are a reflection of, they may slightly stretch it a bit, but they're a reflection of the culture to an extent. So when I see Reels about an employee being called for a stress management session at 8 p.m. and then that's being made a joke out of it. So wellness, the purpose of wellness or whatever initiatives we do, the purpose is defeated.
Sure.
And what I believe is investing in managerial capabilities of managers, equipping them, sensitizing them, more investment on empathy, compassion, and so on and so forth, that can actually have a multiplier effect on any of the wellness initiatives that we do.
Sure.
Even there are organizations which say no carry forward of leaves. You are forced to use up your leaves. And by design, there is no choice.
Yeah.
I said, I have X number of leaves, I need to use up my leaves. So, okay, fine. So, by design, certain things are taken care of.
Yeah.
Right? And even small initiatives like, office lights off by certain time, or no meeting Friday. Some of these things which are more by design sends out a loud message across the organization that as an organization, this is what we believe in.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So we have to tackle this structurally as well as behaviorally. Both have to work together. Okay, great. So I think that's what we wanted to primarily cover through the panel discussion. Happy to take one or two questions if you have for the panel members.